is a peculiar power in doubt, an unseen force that stirs beneath the surface of every whispered dismissal, every scoff, every glance that says, "Not you." They will tell you that you are not enough. They will count your failures before you have even begun. They will weigh you down with their unbelief, hoping you will shrink beneath its burden. And some do. Some fold themselves into the smallness that others have built for them, afraid to stretch, afraid to test the strength of their own wings. But then there are those who rise. There are those who turn doubt into fire, rejection into resolve. They hear the word can't and transform it into a battle cry. They said you couldn't, now prove them wrong. There was a time when the world looked upon you and decided, without knowing the depth of your heart, that you were not meant to succeed. They spoke with certainty, as if the ink of your destiny had already dried, as if your story had been written and they held the final chapter in their hand. But what they did not know, what they could never know, is the storm brewing inside you. The quiet determination taking root beneath every harsh word, every rejection, every moment you were told to sit down, to stay in your place. They underestimated the fire that lives in the chest of the determined, the heartbeat of the one who refuses to be named by someone else's disbelief. They did not see the nights you spent awake, hands trembling over your dreams, wondering if perhaps they were right. They did not see the battles you fought in silence, the moments when even your own reflection questioned you. But you saw, you felt the weight of their words pressing against your spirit, trying to bend you into something smaller, something more manageable. And for a moment, maybe you did bend. Maybe you stepped back, let them speak, let them convince you that the road ahead was too steep, too winding, too filled with obstacles meant to keep you where you are. But then something happened. A flicker of light in the darkness, a whisper in the quiet. Maybe it was the memory of all you have endured, the bruises that did not break you, the wounds that turned into wisdom. Maybe it was the unshakable voice within you that had been silenced for too long, rising up in defiance, declaring that you will not be a footnote in someone else's story. You are not a lesson in failure, not a cautionary tale to be told in hushed voices. You are the author of your own becoming. And so you rise. They said you couldn't, and yet here you stand, not because the road became easier, not because the voices faded, but because you chose to keep walking, even when the path was unseen. They expected you to crumble under the weight of their disbelief, but instead you built yourself into something unshakable. They told you that you would fail, and maybe you did, once, twice, maybe 100 times. But failure is not the ending they believed it to be. It is the soil in which resilience grows, the forge in which strength is tempered. Look at you now, moving through a world that once tried to close its doors to you. Look at the fire in your steps, the certainty in your gaze. You have become something they did not expect, something they did not prepare for. You have become proof that the words of doubters are not prophecy, that the limits they place on you are only as real as you allow them to be. They said you couldn't, but they were wrong. And now you stand at the edge of what is possible, the echoes of their doubt fading behind you. The choice is yours, to turn back, to shrink, to let them write your story for you, or to step forward, to claim your place, to prove that their words hold no power over your destiny. They said you couldn't. Now prove them wrong. They said you couldn't. They let their laughter fill rooms where your name was spoken, their whispers coated in doubt, their certainty thick as iron bars, as if they alone had the authority to decide the limits of your existence. They shook their heads, patted your back with hands that did not believe in you, smiled with lips that carried the weight of their disbelief. And maybe you felt it, maybe it settled into your skin like an unwelcome guest, a shadow that lingered in the corners of your mind, questioning, challenging, daring you to give in, They told you that you were too late, that the door had closed long before you ever reached it. They measured your dreams against their own fears and called them impossible. They counted your setbacks and mistook them for your fate. But what they did not understand is that you were never looking for their permission. You were never waiting for their approval. You were never meant to fit inside the narrow space they carved out for you. You were meant to push beyond it, to expand, to stretch into something they never imagined you could be. There is a fire inside you, one that cannot be smothered by the weight of their doubt. It burns beneath every rejection, every scoff, every moment you were made to feel unworthy. It is the fire of resilience, of determination, of knowing that you were made for more than the smallness they tried to place upon you. And so you move step by step, even when the path is unclear, even when the weight of their disbelief tries to hold you in place. You have felt the sting of failure, the ache of falling short, the bitter taste of being told no. But failure is not the end. It is the sharpening of your strength, the lesson that teaches you how to rise again. The ones who said you couldn't have never known the power of a spirit that refuses to surrender. They have never watched a storm gather within someone they dismissed. They have never stood before a force too great to be contained. But they will. They will watch as you take the steps they swore you would never take. They will hear your name spoken in places they never imagined it would reach. They will see the impossible unfold before them, the very thing they doubted becoming reality. And when they do, they will search for the words to explain it, to make sense of how you could stand where you now stand. They will try to rewrite history, to say they always believed in you, that they always knew you had it in you. But you will know the truth. You will know that it was not their belief that carried you here. It was not their words that pushed you forward. It was you. It was the sleepless nights, the relentless effort, the moments when you could have given up but didn't. It was the days when the weight of their doubt pressed heavy on your back and still you rose. It was the fire inside you, the voice that whispered, keep going, even when the world shouted, stop. There will be moments when the struggle feels endless, when the road ahead looks too long, too steep, too uncertain. There will be days when the voices of doubt grow louder, when even your own reflection seems to ask if you are sure, if you are capable, if you are worthy. And in those moments, you must remember who you are. You must remember the strength that brought you this far, the battles you have already won, the storms you have already survived. They said you couldn't, but here you are, moving, becoming, defying every limit they placed upon you. And the journey is not over. The fire is not done burning. You are still rising, still proving, still becoming the force they never expected. And when they see you standing in the very place they said you would never reach, when they watch as you break through every barrier they built to stop you, they will have no choice but to reckon with the truth. They were wrong. But this is not about them. It was never about them. This is about you, about the power that lives inside you, about the dreams they called foolish, but you refused to abandon, about the strength they overlooked, but you always knew was there. This is about the moment you stopped listening to their doubts and started listening to your own voice. The moment you realize that their disbelief could never define you. There will always be those who say you can't. There will always be those who place limits upon you, who try to fit you inside their narrow understanding of what is possible. Let them talk. Let them doubt. Let them watch as you prove them wrong. Because you will. Because you must. Because you were never meant to be anything less than extraordinary. And when the day comes when you stand at the top of the mountain they swore you would never climb, when you look out at all you have accomplished, when you feel the weight of their disbelief crumble beneath the strength of your success, remember this: you did not rise because of them. You rose in spite of them. You rose because you refused to be bound by their doubt. You rose because you knew, even when no one else did, that you were meant for more. They said you couldn't, now prove them wrong. They said you couldn't, and for a moment, maybe you believed them. Maybe their voices became so loud that they drowned out your own. Maybe the weight of their doubt settled in your bones, made a home inside your heart, whispered to you in the quiet hours of the night. Maybe you looked at the road ahead and saw every obstacle they spoke of, every reason they gave for why you should stop, why you should accept the life they assigned you. And maybe you hesitate, maybe you wondered if they were right. But hesitation is not surrender. Doubt is not defeat. It is in those moments of uncertainty that strength is forged, in those moments of questioning that resolve is born. You did not come this far to let someone else's disbelief shape your future. You did not endure the storms of yesterday only to bow before the opinions of those who do not know the depths of your soul. They said you couldn't because they have only ever seen the surface of who you are. They measured you by what you have been, not what you are becoming. They looked at your past and thought they could predict your future, not realizing that transformation is the language of the determined, that evolution is the gift of those who refuse to be defined by yesterday. So you took a step forward, then another. It did not matter that they watched, waiting for you to stumble. It did not matter that they whispered among themselves, expecting you to fail. You walked anyway. You climbed anyway. You built anyway. You pressed forward with hands that had known struggle, with feet that had walked through fire, with a heart that had been battered but never broken. You moved in silence, worked in the shadows, let your actions speak louder than their doubts ever could. And then, slowly, they began to notice. They saw the small victories, the quiet triumphs, the steady rise of someone they had underestimated. They began to question the certainty with which they dismissed you, but still they held on to their disbelief. Still they insisted that your progress was temporary, that your success was fleeting, that sooner or later you would fall. They waited for the day you would stumble, for the moment you would confirm their suspicions, for the proof they needed to validate their doubt. But you did not stumble, you did not stop, you did not turn back to seek their approval, because you had learned by then that their belief was never required for your journey. You had learned that your strength came from within, that your fire was fueled not by their acceptance, but by your own determination. You had learned that their words were nothing more than noise, and noise has no power unless you listen. So you kept going. You became more than they ever imagined. You reached places they never thought you would see. You accomplished things they swore were impossible for someone like you. And when they saw what you had built, when they saw the life you had carved out of the very Tao where they tried to bury you with, they could no longer deny what stood before them. They had been wrong. But their realization was never the goal. Their acknowledgement was never the reward. You did not rise for them. You did not push forward to prove anything to those who never believed in you to begin with. You did it for yourself, for the person you knew you could become, for the dreams that had lived inside you long before they ever doubted you. They said you couldn't, but here you stand, unshaken, undeniable, unstoppable. And still there is more to do, more mountains to climb, more battles to win, because proving them wrong was never the destination. It was just the beginning. You are not done yet. You are still becoming. You are still rising, and there is nothing they can do to stop you. They said you couldn't, and yet here you are, standing on the edge of everything they swore would never belong to you. They told you the door was closed, bolted shut, with no key made for hands like yours. They looked at you with eyes full of certainty, convinced that their words carried the weight of fate, that their dismissal was the final chapter in your story. They spoke as though they knew you better than you knew yourself, as though their assessment of your worth and your ability was carved into stone, unshakable and absolute. But they were wrong. They did not see the nights you spent wrestling with yourself, torn between the dream that refused to let go of you and the fear that maybe, just maybe, they were right. They did not see the moments when doubt crept in like a shadow, wrapping itself around your thoughts, whispering in a voice that almost sounded like your own. They were not there in the silence when you questioned if the fight was worth it, when you stood at the crossroads of surrender and perseverance, teetering between the life they said you should accept and the life you knew you were meant for. But something inside you would not let you give up. Something in your spirit would not allow you to shrink, to fade, to become the small and forgettable version of yourself that they had so readily accepted. There was a fire in your chest, buried beneath their doubt, waiting for the breath of your own belief to bring it roaring to life. And once it caught flame, there was no turning back. They watched as you refused to sit still, as you defied their expectations, as you chipped away at the walls they had built to keep you in place. They saw the moments when you should have quit, when failure came knocking, when every logical reason told you to stop, but you didn't. You found a way forward, not because it was easy, not because the world suddenly opened its arms to welcome you, but because you refused to accept their version of your future. You dug deep, you fought harder, you stood taller, and with each step, with each victory, you shattered the illusion of their certainty. There were times when they pretended not to see, when they dismissed your progress as luck, when they refused to acknowledge the work, the sacrifice, the relentless determination that carried you forward. They tried to explain it away, to convince themselves that your success was temporary, that eventually you would stumble, that the weight of their words would finally catch up to you. But what they failed to understand was that you had already carried the heaviest burden. The weight of being underestimated, the weight of being counted out before the fight had even begun. And if that did not break you, nothing, they said, ever could. They did not know that every rejection had strengthened you, that every closed door had forced you to find another way, that every moment of doubt had become fuel, pushing you beyond the limits they swore you could never reach. They did not realize that their disbelief had not weakened you. It had forged you. It had sharpened your resolve, turned your pain into power, transformed you into something they could no longer ignore. And now they see it. They see you standing in the place they never thought you would reach. And now you are proof, not just to them, but to yourself. Proof that limits are meant to be broken. Proof that doubt holds no power over a determined soul. Proof that the only voice that truly matters is the one inside you, the one that never stopped whispering, never stopped believing, never stopped pushing you forward. They said you couldn't, but you did, and you are not done yet, because this is just the beginning, because there is still more to build, more to conquer, more to become, because every time someone says it can't be done, there will be another fire ignited, another spirit awakened, another person who refuses to be defined by someone else's disbelief. And now the question is no longer whether you can. The question is, how far will you go? How much will you achieve? How many will look to you and find the courage to rise, to fight, to break through every barrier placed before them? Because what you have done is not just for you. It is a testament to everyone who has ever been told that they are not enough, that they do not belong, that they should not even try. You have shown them that the only limits that exist are the ones we accept, that doubt is not a prophecy but a challenge, that every whispered dismissal, every scoff, every rejection is simply an opportunity to prove them wrong, not with words, not with arguments, but with action, with persistence, with undeniable success. And so you keep going, you keep rising, you keep pushing past every expectation they placed upon you, because you were never meant to be ordinary. You were never meant to stay where they left you. You were meant to break every rule they swore you could not defy. You were meant to take everything they said you couldn't have. You were meant to be the proof that their doubt was never stronger than your belief. They said you couldn't, and yet here you are, unstoppable, unshakable, unbreakable, and still there is more to do, because this story is not finished, because you are not done writing it, because you have only just begun. They said you couldn't, and for a time they reveled in that belief. They spoke it like a prophecy, sealed it like a truth, let it settle into their minds as though they had the authority to determine your destiny. They measured your potential by the limits of their own imagination, weighed your ability against the heaviness of their own fears, and found you lacking, not because you were not enough, but because they themselves had never dared to push beyond what was comfortable, beyond what was expected, beyond what was easy. They mistook your silence for surrender, your patience for passivity, your setbacks for an ending. They did not see the way you studied the battlefield, the way you gathered your strength, the way you prepared yourself for the moment when you would rise. They did not understand that stillness is not the same as stagnation, that waiting is not the same as weakness, that sometimes the most powerful move is the one made in deliberate, unshakable determination. They thought they had seen the full extent of you, thought they had grasped all that you were capable of, thought they had already witnessed your peak. But what they did not realize is that you were only just beginning. They did not see the depths of your resilience, the wellspring of fight that lived within you, the fire that had been burning long before they ever cast their first stone of doubt. And so you moved quietly, steadily, intentionally. You put in the work when no one was watching, labored in the shadows while they dismissed you, prepared yourself for a moment they never saw coming. You understood that victory is not always loud, that transformation is not always broadcasted, that real success does not need an audience in its early stages. There were days when doubt clung to you, wrapped itself around your mind like a fog, whispering the same words they had spoken over you. There were nights when exhaustion pulled at you, when the weight of the journey felt like more than you could bear. There were moments when you questioned if the fight was worth it, if pushing forward against the tide of disbelief was truly necessary. But deep down, you knew that you could not live in the cage they had built for you. You knew that you could not accept the smallness they had assigned to you. You knew that to stop now would be to prove them right, and that was something you could never do. So you rose, even when it was difficult. You pushed forward, even when the path was unclear. You fought not just against their doubts, but against your own, against the fear that had been planted in you by a world that had tried to convince you that you were not enough. And with each step, with each victory, with each moment of perseverance, you chipped away at the illusion they had built around you. Then one day they saw it. They saw the fruits of your labor, the evidence of what they had once sworn was impossible. They saw you standing in the place they never believed you would reach, saw you holding the things they once told you would never be yours, saw you living the reality they had dismissed as nothing more than a foolish dream. And they did not know what to do with that truth. They did not know how to reconcile their past words with your present success. They struggled to find explanations, to rewrite their history, to pretend as though they had always believed in you. But the truth was undeniable. The evidence was before them. The very thing they said could not be done was now standing right in front of them, unshakable and real. But you did not rise for their recognition. You did not climb this mountain for their applause. You did not fight this battle so they would finally see your worth, because you had learned something far more valuable along the way. You had learned that their belief was never required for your success. You had learned that their doubt was never stronger than your determination. You had learned that you were never meant to be bound by the limitations of those who could not see your vision. And now you walk forward, not just for yourself, but for everyone who has ever been told they were not enough, for everyone who has ever been dismissed before they even had a chance to try, for everyone who has ever been burdened by the weight of someone else's disbelief, because your journey is proof that the only limits that exist are the ones we choose to accept. They said you couldn't, but you did, and you will keep going because there is still more to do, because this story is not over, because you are not done proving, proving not to them but to yourself that you were always capable, that you were always worthy, that you were always meant to rise. They said you couldn't, and they spoke it with such certainty that for a moment even the wind seemed to carry their words as if they were truth. They nodded among themselves, reassured in their collective doubt, comfortable in their decision that you would never rise beyond the limits they had assigned you. They dismissed you with a wave of the hand, reduced you to a name barely worth mentioning, to a dream that would never see the light of day. They placed you in a box labeled never, sealed it with words soaked in disbelief, and expected you to remain there. They believed you were finished before you had even begun. They saw your starting line as an ending. They mistook your struggle for surrender, your obstacles for defeat, your failures for finality, but they did not understand that the soil of failure is where the strongest roots grow. They did not know that buried things do not always stay buried. Sometimes they rise stronger than before, unshaken by the weight that once held them down. And so while they whispered among themselves, while they laughed in quiet corners and exchanged glances of certainty in your downfall, you were moving, you were learning, you were growing in the spaces they never bothered to look. You were gathering strength in the silence, preparing for the moment when you would step forward, not with anger, not with the need for revenge, but with the quiet, undeniable power of someone who knows exactly who they are. They never expected to see you rise. They never anticipated that the same person they had dismissed, the same dream they had laughed at, would one day stand before them, unshaken, undeniable, unstoppable. They did not think the mountain they swore was too high, the door they claimed was too heavy, the road they insisted was too long. None of it was beyond you. And when they finally saw you, when they finally had no choice but to acknowledge what you had built, what you had become, they searched for explanations. They told themselves it was luck, that you had stumbled upon success by chance, that it was given to you rather than earned. They rewrote history in their minds, convincing themselves that they had always known you would make it, that they had always believed in you deep down. But the truth lingers in the spaces between their words. The truth is in the looks they exchange, in the silence they cannot fill, in the realization that they had been wrong. But by then, it does not matter, because your journey was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving yourself right. It was about stepping into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. It was about pushing past the limits that were never truly yours to begin with. It was about becoming so rooted in your own belief that no one else's doubt could shake you. And now, as you stand on the foundation you built, as you walk through doors they swore would remain closed, as you carve a path for those who will come after you, the echoes of their disbelief fade, because their words hold no weight here, because their doubt was never your burden to carry, because you have always been more than they could see. They said you couldn't, but you did, and you are still rising, because this is only the beginning, because there are still greater heights to reach, still more victories to claim, still more stories to write with the ink of perseverance and the fire of an unshakable spirit. And when they look at you now, they see not just the person they once underestimated, but the force they never saw coming, a force that will not stop, a force that will not bend, a force that will continue to rise again and again, no matter how many times the world says you can't. You have risen beyond the weight of their words, beyond the barriers they swore you could never break. You have proven, not through anger or desperation, but through relentless action, through the unwavering belief that you were always capable. Their doubt was never your truth, their limits were never your own, and their disbelief was never a prophecy, only noise meant to distract, meant to discourage. But you did not bow to it. You did not shrink beneath it. You did not allow their voices to drown out the calling within you. Now you stand as proof that the impossible is only a reflection of what has never been attempted. You are the evidence that dreams are not meant to remain locked away. And as you continue forward, as you climb even higher, remember, this victory is yours, not because they said you couldn't, but because you always knew you could.